Eliza stopped sweeping the hallway before she even understood why. The broom slipped from her hands and hit the wood with a dull crack. Dust floated in the air. Her chest tightened. She heard it again, soft and shaky, like a child trying not to cry too loudly. Eliza. Her throat went dry. She looked toward the kitchen first, then the stairs, then the front door. Nothing moved. The ranch house was still. Too still. She bent slowly and picked up the broom. "You're tired," she whispered to herself. Then the voice came again. "Eliza. Please." This time it was lower. Not across the room. Not outside. Below her. She stared at the floorboards under her boots. The sound of quiet crying rose through the wood. Eliza dropped to her knees so fast her palms slapped the floor. "Who's there?" The crying stopped. She pressed her ear against the boards. The wood smelled old and sour. For one long second, nothing. Then a tiny inhale. "Down here." Eliza jerked back hard enough to hit the wall behind her. Her breathing turned shallow. She looked around the hallway again as if someone might jump out laughing. No one did. A door opened at the far end. Mrs. Vale stepped out holding a folded sheet. Her face was pale, lined, sharp at every edge. "Why'd you stop?" Eliza stood too quickly. "There's someone under the floor." Mrs. Vale didn't move. "No, I heard a child." "No, you didn't." Eliza pointed down. "She called my name." Mrs. Vale's jaw tightened. "You've been here 3 weeks. No child knows your name." She knew it. Mrs. Vale walked closer, each step slow and controlled. "There are no children in this house." "Then who was crying?" Mrs. Vale looked at the floor once. Just once. It was fast, but Eliza caught it. That was enough. Eliza narrowed her eyes. "You heard it too." Mrs. Vale's voice sharpened. "Pick up your broom." No, for the first time since arriving, Eliza did not lower her eyes. The two women stood inches apart in the hallway, both rigid. Mrs. Vale leaned closer. "You are paid to clean. And I'm hearing children under your floorboards." Silence. Mrs. Vale's fingers twitched against the sheet she held. That tiny movement unsettled Eliza more than shouting would have. The older woman turned away. "There's rot in this house. Pipes shift. Wood settles." That wasn't wood. Mrs. Vale stopped walking. "Enough." She disappeared into her room and shut the door harder than needed. Eliza remained still until the latch clicked. Then she dropped to the floor again. Her hands searched the cracks between boards. One plank near the wall had a slight lift on one side. Loose. She dug her fingernails under it and pulled. Nothing. She tried again harder. The board groaned but did not move. "Eliza." Her whole body froze. Not from below this time. Closer. Right beside her ear. She spun around so fast she nearly fell. Empty hallway. No one there. The crying returned, quieter now, weaker. Like the child was tired. "Please." Eliza's eyes filled before she understood why. Something about the voice touched a place in her she kept buried deep and sealed shut. A memory almost surfaced. Warm skin. Small fingers. A blanket. Gone again. She clenched her jaw. "No," she whispered. But her hands were already back on the floor. She pulled at the board again until one nail snapped. Footsteps approached from outside. Heavy boots. Silas entered carrying a crate of tools. He stopped when he saw her kneeling. "What are you doing?" "There's a child under here." Silas frowned. "What?" "She's crying." He set the crate down. "Eliza." She said my name. He stared at her a little too long. Not confused. Concerned. Then something else. Recognition. You should stand up. No, Eliza. Help me lift this. Silas shook his head once. You don't want to do that. A cold wave moved through her. Why not? Before he could answer, the child spoke again. Soft as dust. Broken as breath. You left me. Everything inside Eliza stopped. Her hands went still on the floorboards. Her face drained of color. She whispered the only word she could manage. No, the hallway felt smaller now, like the walls had leaned in to listen. Somewhere above them, a floorboard creaked though no one walked there. Silas slowly stepped back from her, as if he already knew this house had been waiting for her to hear that voice. And somewhere below, the crying turned into slow breathing again. Eliza did not move. Her palms stayed flat against the floorboards while the words echoed through her chest. You left me. The sentence was small, almost weak, but it struck like something heavy dropped from a height. Silas crouched beside her and lowered his voice. Stand up. She shook her head. There's someone under here. Not someone you can help tonight. You heard that too. He looked toward Mrs. Vale's closed door before answering. Stand up. Eliza pushed herself upright slowly, her knees aching from the hardwood. She stared at him. Tell me what this is. Not here. Then where? Before he could answer, Mrs. Vale's door opened again. She stepped out dressed now in a dark shawl, face even colder than before. Her eyes went straight to the loosened board. Did I not give you an instruction? Eliza crossed her arms. And I ignored it. That is clear. Why is there a child under your floor? Mrs. Vale's lips tightened. There is no child. Then open it. No, the answer came too fast. Too sharp. Eliza stepped closer. Why not? Mrs. Vale lifted her chin. Because I own this house. And what is beneath it is mine as well. That sentence hung in the air like a bad smell. Silas muttered under his breath, enough. Eliza turned to him. You knew. I know enough to mind my business. That must be easy for you. His expression hardened. You think I enjoy this place? Mrs. Vale snapped, Silas. He fell quiet. Eliza looked between them. The house suddenly felt less like a home and more like a body keeping secrets under its skin. She knelt again before anyone could stop her. Mrs. Vale took one step forward. Don't. Eliza wedged her fingers into the crack. Move me, then. Mrs. Vale stared at her for a long second. Then she surprised them both by stepping back. You are making a mistake. Maybe. Eliza pulled harder. The plank shifted with a dry groan. Dust burst upward. A dark gap appeared beneath it. Cold air brushed her face. She froze, staring into the narrow opening. Nothing but black. Then a sound. Not crying this time. Breathing. Slow. Careful. Waiting. Eliza leaned closer. Hello? Silence. Then a tiny scrape below, like nails touching wood. Her stomach twisted. She widened the gap another inch. Something pale flashed below the darkness. She gasped and recoiled. Silas grabbed her arm. Enough. Did you see that? Close it. There was a hand. Close it now. Mrs. Vale's voice stayed calm, which somehow made it worse. Seal it. Eliza looked up at her. You're scared. No, you are. Mrs. Vale's hands trembled once at her sides. There it was again. Fear. Real and ugly. Eliza smiled without warmth. Good. She reached toward the opening again. Silas caught both her wrists. Stop. Let go. Not until you think. Thinking got me nowhere. And digging will? Their faces were inches apart now. Maybe. He lowered his voice further. This house feeds on women who stay curious. Eliza stared at him. That's supposed to frighten me? It should. A sudden thud sounded overhead. All three looked up. Heavy. Slow. Like bare feet crossing the upstairs hall. Eliza whispered, "There's someone up there." "No one is up there," Mrs. Vale said, but her voice cracked halfway through. Another thud. Then another. Measured steps. Crossing directly above them. Eliza pulled free from Silas and backed away from the floor. "You hear that now?" Mrs. Vale went pale. Truly pale. The sound stopped. Silence returned so suddenly it felt deliberate. Eliza bent and shoved the loose board back into place with shaking hands. Not because she wanted to. Because suddenly the dark beneath it felt safer than whatever had moved above them. She stood breathing hard. "What is upstairs?" Mrs. Vale answered too softly. "Nothing for you." "That's not an answer." "It is the only one you'll get." Eliza looked toward the staircase. The hallway felt narrower than before, the air heavier. Somewhere above, a floorboard creaked once, almost like a response. Then stillness again. Eliza wiped dust from her palms onto her skirt and stared at the stairs. "Fine," she said. "Then I'll go ask myself." Silas stepped in front of the staircase. "You're not going anywhere alone." Eliza gave him a tired look. "Then come with me." "Bad idea." "So is breathing in this house, yet here we are." Mrs. Vale closed her eyes for 1 second, as if fighting something older than anger. When she opened them, there was resignation there. "If you go upstairs," she said, "do not touch the white door." Eliza tilted her head. "Why?" Mrs. Vale turned away before answering. "Because some rooms are kinder when left hungry." No one spoke after that. The house seemed to listen. Outside wind scratched against the windows like nails. Silas did not follow her immediately. That was the first thing Eliza noticed as she stood at the base of the stairs. He stayed behind her, close but not stepping forward, like he was waiting for the house itself to decide what would happen next. Mrs. Vale stood near the hallway wall, arms tight around herself. No one spoke for a full moment. Then Eliza took the first step. The wood groaned under her boot. Silas finally moved. "Don't go fast," he said. Eliza didn't look back. "I'm not going slow." Second step. Third step. The air upstairs felt different. Not colder. Heavier. Like the house had been holding its breath for a long time. Silas followed. Mrs. Vale did not. She stayed at the bottom like she refused to climb into her own memory. Eliza reached the top landing. 3 doors. One at the far end painted white. It stood out too much. Too clean for this house. Silas stopped behind her. "That one's locked." Eliza didn't answer. A soft sound came from behind the white door. A scrape. Then a tiny knock. Eliza whispered, "Hello?" Silas grabbed her wrist. "No." The knock came again. Faster this time. Like someone had heard her. Eliza pulled free. "There's a child in there." Silas shook his head. "There's no child in there anymore." That word hit differently. "Anymore." Eliza walked straight toward the white door. "Step back," Silas said. She stopped in front of it. The wood was clean, almost new compared to the rest of the house. She raised her hand. Silas snapped, "Eliza." She touched the door. Cold. A whisper came from inside immediately. "Don't leave." Eliza froze. Her throat tightened. "Who is that?" Silas whispered behind her, "Don't answer it." The voice inside shifted. You came back. Eliza stepped closer. What did you say? Silas grabbed her shoulders from behind. Walk away. She shook him off again. Open it, she said. Silas exhaled hard. You don't want that. I already heard a child under the floor, she said. I already heard one in the walls. So don't tell me what I want. A long silence from inside the room. Then a softer voice. Almost tired. Eliza. She staggered back a step. Silas caught her before she fell. What did it say? Eliza stared at the door. It knows me. Silas went still. Behind them, Mrs. Vale appeared at the top of the stairs. She had followed after all. She looked at the white door and immediately stopped breathing right. No, she said quietly. Eliza turned. You know what's in there. Mrs. Vale didn't answer. Eliza stepped toward her. Tell me. Mrs. Vale's voice broke slightly. You were not supposed to hear that room. Silas muttered, That's not an answer. Mrs. Vale finally looked at Eliza directly. Something in her expression changed. Not anger. Not fear. Something closer to grief that had been held too long. She doesn't live there, Mrs. Vale said. Eliza frowned. Then who does? Mrs. Vale hesitated. That hesitation was the worst part. Silas noticed it too. Don't do this. Mrs. Vale ignored him. She used to, she said. Eliza's body went cold. The white door creaked slightly from inside. Like someone pressed against it. Eliza whispered, Used to what? Mrs. Vale stepped back a little. Live. Silas exhaled sharply. That's enough. Eliza didn't move. The voice inside spoke again. Closer now. You brought her. Eliza's lips parted. Brought who? Silas grabbed her arm again. We're leaving. She shook him off violently. No. Mrs. Vale's voice turned low. Stop talking to it. Eliza snapped, It's talking to me. Silas looked between them. This is why people don't open doors in this house. A sudden thud came from inside the white room. Not a knock. A hit. Then scratching. Fast. Desperate. Eliza stepped forward again. There's someone in there. Mrs. Vale whispered, There shouldn't be. That sentence landed heavier than anything else. Silas stepped in front of Eliza. We're done. Eliza pushed past him. Her hand went to the doorknob. Cold metal. She paused. Inside, the voice changed again. This time it sounded almost relieved. You found it. Eliza turned her head slightly. Found what? Silas said urgently, Don't open it. Mrs. Vale whispered, If you open it, it remembers you too. Eliza stopped. That word. Remembers. The knob turned on its own. Slow. Click. Silas grabbed her from behind. No. But the door opened anyway. Not wide. Just enough. A thin slice of darkness spilled into the hallway. And inside that darkness, a small bed. A broken toy. And a child's shadow sitting very still. Eliza couldn't breathe. Silas froze completely. Mrs. Vale stepped back like she had been struck. The child's voice came one last time. Clear now. Not crying. Not broken. Just tired. Eliza, you finally came. And the door opened a little wider. The moment the white door opened wider, Eliza didn't step forward. She couldn't. The air inside felt wrong, like it had been sealed for too long and was finally allowed to breathe again. A small bed sat against the far wall. No movement. No sound. Silas grabbed her shoulder hard. Don't go in. Eliza didn't look at him. That's a child. Mrs. Vale stood behind them, frozen at the top of the stairs. Her voice came out thin. No one is supposed to be there. That sentence hit the hallway like a confession she didn't mean to say out loud. Eliza finally stepped into the room. The floor creaked under her weight. Nothing happened. No voice. No cry. Just stillness. She looked around slowly. A broken toy horse on the floor. A small chair overturned near the wall. A faded drawing pinned crooked above the bed. Silas stayed at the doorway. Eliza, come out. She ignored him. Her eyes locked on the bed. The sheets were folded too neatly. Like someone had been trying to erase whoever slept there. Eliza whispered, "Where is she?" Mrs. Vale didn't answer. That was worse than any lie. Eliza walked closer to the bed. Each step slower now. Heavier. Silas spoke again, lower. This is how people lose themselves in this house. Eliza stopped at the bed. Her hand hovered over the blanket. Then she pulled it back. I heard her, she said quietly. Mrs. Vale's voice cracked. So did I. That was new. Silence followed. Eliza turned sharply. So where is she? Mrs. Vale looked at the floor. Gone. Eliza snapped, Gone where? Mrs. Vale's lips trembled slightly. Silas muttered, Don't do this. Eliza turned on him. Don't do what? Ask questions? Silas shook his head. Digging this up won't fix anything. Eliza's voice dropped. Something is still here. As if on cue, the room shifted. A soft thud came from inside the closet. All three of them turned. Silas stepped forward first, cautious now. He pulled the closet door open slowly. Empty. Then another sound. From under the bed. Eliza knelt immediately. Silas reached for her again. No. She shoved him away. Move. She grabbed the edge of the bed frame and pulled. Dust burst into the air. Something small slid across the floor beneath it. A piece of cloth. A ribbon. Eliza stopped breathing. She picked it up slowly. Her fingers tightened around it. Mrs. Vale's face changed instantly. No, she whispered. Eliza stood slowly. You recognize this? Mrs. Vale didn't answer. That told her everything. Silas stepped closer. What is it? Eliza turned the ribbon in her hand. Her voice barely held steady. It was mine. Silas frowned. What? Eliza swallowed. Before I came here. The room felt smaller again. Mrs. Vale finally spoke. You should not have that. Eliza looked up sharply. Why? Mrs. Vale's voice broke slightly. Because it means she was real. Silas went still. Who? Mrs. Vale shook her head like she regretted speaking at all. Eliza stepped closer. Tell me. Mrs. Vale's eyes filled for the first time. She was your child. Silas exhaled sharply. What? Eliza didn't move. Didn't blink. Mrs. Vale continued, voice shaking now. She was here. Years ago. Eliza's grip on the ribbon tightened until her knuckles whitened. That's not possible, she said flatly. Mrs. Vale looked at her like she was begging her to understand. You were told she died. Silas stepped in. Eliza. She cut him off without looking. Don't. Mrs. Vale whispered, she didn't. The room went silent in a way that felt alive. Eliza's voice turned hollow. Where is she? Mrs. Vale hesitated. Silas saw it first. Don't answer that. Eliza turned slightly. If you know, you say it. Mrs. Vale shook her head. I don't know. Eliza's expression shifted. Not anger. Something worse. Understanding forming too fast. You're lying, she said. Mrs. Vale flinched. Silas grabbed Eliza's arm again. We're leaving this room. Eliza didn't resist. But she didn't move either. Her eyes stayed on Mrs. Vale. You said she was here, Eliza whispered. So she was here. Mrs. Vale closed her eyes. A long pause. Then barely audible. Yes. Silas stepped between them. Enough. But Eliza wasn't listening anymore. Her gaze shifted slowly back to the bed. The room felt different again. Not empty. Not quiet. Waiting. Eliza whispered, she's still here. Mrs. Vale shook her head fast. No. Eliza turned slightly toward the walls. The voice, she said. It wasn't under the floor. Silas froze. Eliza continued, softer now. It was never under the floor. A faint sound came from inside the room. Not a knock this time. A breath. Close. Right behind her. Eliza didn't turn around. Neither did anyone else. And the room, for the first time, felt like it had chosen someone to speak through. The moment Mrs. Vale said she didn't, Eliza felt something inside her shift, like a door locking from the inside of her own mind. She still stood in the nursery. The ribbon was in her hand. But the room no longer felt like a room. It felt like a place that had been waiting for her longer than she had been alive. Silas broke the silence first. Eliza, step away from the bed. She didn't move. Mrs. Vale stayed near the doorway, her face pale in a way that didn't look like fear anymore. It looked like exhaustion. Like she had been holding this weight for too many years. Eliza finally spoke, voice flat. You said she was here. Mrs. Vale nodded once. Yes. Then where is she now? Silas cut in fast. This is going too far. Eliza ignored him completely. Where? She repeated, slower, sharper. Mrs. Vale's lips trembled. I don't know. Eliza let out a short laugh. No humor in it. That's your answer? Mrs. Vale's eyes dropped to the floor. It's the only honest one I have left. Silas stepped between them again. This isn't helping anything. Eliza turned her head slightly toward him. You keep saying that. Silas tightened his jaw. Because I've seen what happens when people start digging through this place. Eliza looked back at the bed. The ribbon in her hand suddenly felt heavier. Like it wasn't fabric anymore. Like it was proof. Her voice dropped. You said I had a child. Mrs. Vale didn't answer immediately. That pause said everything. Eliza took a step closer. Say it again. Mrs. Vale swallowed hard. You had a daughter. Silas shook his head sharply. This is not. Eliza snapped at him without looking. Don't. Silas stopped. The room went tight again. Eliza's voice softened, but only slightly. What was her name? Mrs. Vale hesitated. That hesitation lasted too long. Eliza, Silas warned quietly. Mrs. Vale finally said it. Anna. The word landed wrong in the room. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just final. Eliza didn't react at first. She just stood there, staring at nothing. Then she whispered, almost like she was testing the sound of it. Anna. Silas watched her carefully now. Eliza, listen to me. She finally blinked. Once. Twice. Then she turned her head toward Mrs. Vale. Say it again. Mrs. Vale shook her head. No. Eliza stepped forward. Say it again. Silas grabbed her arm. Stop pushing her. Eliza yanked free instantly. Don't touch me. Silas froze. Mrs. Vale's voice broke slightly. Anna. Eliza closed her eyes. For a moment, the room felt like it tilted. Not physically. Emotionally. Like something deep inside her had been pulled upward. Images flickered, too fast to hold. A small face. A laugh she almost recognized. A weight in her arms. Gone too quickly. Eliza opened her eyes sharply. Her breathing changed. Faster now. Where is she? She said again, but this time it wasn't a question. It was pressure. Silas stepped back slightly. Eliza, you need to stop. She turned toward him. Stop what? This, he said. This is how people break in this house. Eliza's voice hardened. I already broke. Silas didn't answer that. Because he couldn't. Mrs. Vale suddenly spoke, quieter now. There is something under this place. Silas exhaled sharply. No. Mrs. Vale continued anyway. Not under the floor. Deeper. Eliza stared at her. What does that mean? Mrs. Vale's eyes lifted slowly. There are things the house remembers. Silas muttered, that's enough. Eliza stepped forward again. No. Keep talking. Mrs. Vale looked at her directly now. Your child, she wasn't the first. Silas snapped, stop. But Mrs. Vale didn't stop. She was one of many. Eliza went still. Silas looked at Mrs. Vale like she had crossed a line she couldn't come back from. Eliza whispered, many what? Mrs. Vale's voice dropped even lower. Children who were taken. Silas shook his head again, harder this time. You're losing control. Mrs. Vale ignored him. Not taken like theft, she said. Taken like silence. Eliza stepped closer. Who took them? Mrs. Vale's mouth opened slightly. But before she could answer, a sound came from the wall. Not the bed. Not the floor. The wall behind the dresser. A soft tapping. 3 times. Pause. Then again. Silas turned immediately. No. Eliza didn't move. The tapping came again. Closer this time. Eliza walked toward it. Silas grabbed her wrist. Eliza, don't. She looked at him. You hear it too. Silas didn't answer. Because he did. Mrs. Vale whispered, don't open anything else. Eliza pulled free again. She pressed her hand against the wall. Cold. The tapping stopped instantly. Silence snapped back like a rope pulled tight. Eliza whispered, Anna? No response. Then, a faint breath from inside the wall. Eliza's entire body went rigid. Silas stepped back slowly. We're done here. Mrs. Vale finally spoke like she was confessing something she had buried for years. The house doesn't just hide things, she said. It keeps them close. Eliza turned her head slightly. Close to what? Mrs. Vale looked at her. Close to whoever remembers them. The room fell silent again. And for the first time, Eliza understood something she didn't want to understand. The voice wasn't trapped in the house. It was waiting for her to remember it properly. Eliza left the nursery without waiting for permission. No one stopped her this time. Not Silas. Not Mrs. Vale. They followed, but at a distance, like they were afraid the house might choose sides. Eliza walked faster than she meant to. Down the stairs. Past the hallway. Past the floorboard she had lifted earlier. She didn't look at it. Because if she did, she might stop. And she couldn't stop anymore. Silas finally spoke behind her. Where are you going? Eliza didn't slow down. Outside, Mrs. Vale's voice came quieter. Don't go to the well. That made her stop for half a second. Just half. Then she kept walking. Then I'll see it myself. Silas caught up. Eliza, listen. She turned on him sharply. No more listening. That shut him up. They stepped out into the open air. The ranch stretched wide and silent. Too silent. Even the wind felt careful here. Eliza walked straight toward the old well near the back fence. Mrs. Vale stayed near the porch like she couldn't follow any further. Silas stayed with Eliza, but tense. You don't know what that place is, he said. Eliza didn't look at him. Then explain it. Silas hesitated. That hesitation again. Eliza stopped walking. You all do that. You hesitate like truth is dangerous. Silas lowered his voice. It is. She gave a small, empty laugh. Not more than lies. She kept moving. The well came into view. Old stone. Collapsed wood cover pushed aside like it had been disturbed recently. Eliza slowed now. Not from fear. From recognition. Like something inside her had seen this before. Silas muttered, "We should go back." Eliza ignored him. She stepped right to the edge of the well. Cold air rose from inside it. Not natural cold. Deep or. She knelt and looked down. Darkness. No bottom visible. Just a slow breath of air rising up. Eliza whispered, "Hello?" Silas grabbed her arm. "Don't speak into it." She pulled free again. "Why?" Mrs. Vale's voice came from behind them, strained. "Because it answers." Eliza looked over her shoulder. "Good." Silas shook his head. "No, that's not good." Eliza leaned closer over the edge. The air from below shifted. Like something moved far down there. Then. A sound. Soft. A child's cry. Eliza froze instantly. Silas went rigid beside her. "No." Eliza whispered, "Anna?" The cry stopped. Silence. Then a voice. Not echoing. Clear. "Eliza." She pulled back slightly, breathing uneven. Silas grabbed her shoulder harder now. "We leave. Now." But Eliza was already leaning in again. "Where are you?" she said into the well. A pause. Then the voice replied. "Down here." Eliza's grip on the stone tightened. Mrs. Vale stepped closer behind them, shaking. "Don't go near it." Eliza didn't look back. "You said she was gone." Mrs. Vale's voice cracked. "She is." Silas snapped, "Then what is that?" No one answered. Because the voice came again. Stronger this time. "You left me." Eliza's breath stopped. Silas saw her face change. "Eliza, look at me." She didn't. Her eyes stayed fixed on the well. The voice shifted again. Not crying now. Not pleading. Just steady. "Come back." Eliza whispered, almost unintentionally, "I don't remember leading you." Silas went still. Mrs. Vale closed her eyes like she couldn't watch anymore. The well answered immediately. "You forgot." Eliza's hand slipped slightly on the stone. Silas grabbed her fully now. "That's not real." "That's not real." Eliza whispered, "It sounds real." Mrs. Vale spoke behind them, barely audible. "Memory sounds real too." Silas turned on her. "Stop helping it." But Mrs. Vale wasn't looking at him. She was looking at Eliza. Like she was watching something she had tried to prevent for years finally happen anyway. Eliza slowly reached toward the well again. Silas yanked her back. "No." She turned on him suddenly, eyes sharp. If that's my child. Silas cut her off. It's not proof. It's sound. Eliza shoved him back hard. Then what is truth here? Silas staggered. Silence hit again. Then from the well. A different sound. Not crying. Not voice. A soft humming. A lullaby. Eliza froze. Her expression changed. Something broke through her anger. Recognition again. This time deeper. Her lips parted slightly. Mrs. Vale whispered, she used to hum that. Silas turned slowly. What? Mrs. Vale shook her head. Before she disappeared. Eliza's voice came out low. She? Mrs. Vale hesitated. Silas said, don't. But Mrs. Vale answered anyway. Your daughter. The wind stopped for a second. Not metaphorically. Actually stopped. Eliza stepped back from the well. Slowly. Like her body didn't fully trust the ground anymore. Say it again, she whispered. Mrs. Vale's voice trembled. She was here. Eliza's breathing changed. Faster. Broken. Silas reached for her again but didn't touch her this time. Because he saw her face. Something had already shifted too far. Eliza walked to the edge again. Down into the well, the humming continued. Soft. Familiar. She whispered, Anna. And the humming stopped. Silence returned. Then. Very close. From right below the stone rim. A small voice. I'm here. Eliza knelt instantly, leaning over the edge again. Silas shouted, Eliza, stop. But she didn't stop. She looked down into the dark and whispered. Tell me where. And from the deep, the answer came. Follow me. The wind returned all at once. Harder now. Like the ranch itself had finally started listening too. Silas didn't wait for permission this time. The moment Eliza leaned toward the well again, he grabbed her and pulled her back hard. Eliza! Enough! She struggled instantly. Let go. Mrs. Vale stepped in closer, voice shaking now. You don't understand what you're opening. Eliza snapped her head toward her. Then explain it. Silas held her arms tight. You're not going down there. Eliza stopped fighting for a second. Not because she agreed. Because she was listening. From the well came the lullaby again. Soft. Patient. Waiting. Eliza's breathing slowed. Anna, she whispered. Silas tightened his grip. That's not her. Eliza turned on him suddenly. How do you know? Silas hesitated. That hesitation again. Mrs. Vale saw it and stepped back like she couldn't stand to hear any more. Eliza looked at both of them. You both know something. Silas shook his head. We know this place lies. Eliza shook him off again, harder this time. Then why does it know her name? Silas didn't answer. Because from the well. The voice came clearer. Eliza, come down. Mrs. Vale covered her mouth with her hand. Silas muttered, this is how it pulls you in. Eliza stared into the dark opening. Her face changed again. Not fear. Recognition. Like something inside her had been turned the right way for the first time in years. I need to see, she said. Silas grabbed her again immediately. No. She shoved him hard enough that he stumbled back. Mrs. Vale shouted, stop her. But Eliza was already on the edge of the well. She lowered herself without thinking. Her hands gripping stone. Silas lunged. Eliza! He grabbed her ankle. She kicked him off. For a second, everything was chaos, dust, movement, breath. Then Eliza slipped into the well. Not falling. Climbing. Down into darkness. Silas shouted after her. "You'll die in there." Mrs. Vale dropped to her knees at the edge. "Eliza, please." Eliza didn't answer. The sound of her descent faded quickly. The well swallowed everything. Silence returned above ground. Silas stood frozen, staring down. Mrs. Vale whispered, "She shouldn't have gone." Silas turned on her. "You let this happen." Mrs. Vale shook her head. "I tried to stop it for years." Silas snapped, "Stop what?" Mrs. Vale's voice broke. Her remembering. Below them, faint sounds echoed up. Eliza's boots scraping stone. Then nothing. Silas crouched at the edge. "Eliza." No answer. He looked at Mrs. Vale. "There's nothing down there." Mrs. Vale whispered, "That's what it wants you to think." Silas frowned. "What does?" Mrs. Vale didn't answer. Instead, she leaned closer to the well. And listened. Silas followed her gaze reluctantly. At first, nothing. Then. A sound. Not Eliza. Not the voice from before. Something else. Deeper. Heavier. Like something shifting far below the ground itself. Silas stepped back. "What is that?" Mrs. Vale whispered, "The rest of it." Silas turned sharply. "The rest of what?" But Mrs. Vale was already standing again, backing away from the well. "No," she said quietly. "She went too far down." Silas looked into the well again. "Eliza," he shouted one more time. Then. A voice answered. But it wasn't Eliza. It was layered. Multiple voices at once. Some childlike. Some broken. Some almost calm. All saying the same thing. "She's here." Silas froze. Mrs. Vale whispered, "It remembers her now." Silas stepped away from the well slowly. "We pull her out." Mrs. Vale shook her head fast. "You can't pull her out." Silas snapped, "We try." Mrs. Vale grabbed his arm. "If you reach for her now, it takes you too." Silas looked at her like she was insane. "What is it?" Mrs. Vale's eyes filled again, but she didn't look away this time. "The place under everything," she said. "Where they put what they couldn't bury properly." Silas went silent. From the well, Eliza's voice finally came. Faint. But real. "I can see her." Silas leaned forward instantly. "Eliza. Where are you?" A pause. Then her voice again. "She's not alone." Mrs. Vale closed her eyes. Silas shouted, "What do you see?" Eliza's voice came back slower now. "Children." Silas went still. Mrs. Vale whispered, "Don't listen to it." But Eliza continued. "So many." Silas stepped back from the well now, breathing uneven. Eliza's voice grew fainter again. "And they're waiting." Silas shook his head. "Come back up." A long silence. Then Eliza spoke one last time from below. "I think I remember now." And then. Nothing. No voice. No sound. The well went completely silent. Silas dropped to his knees at the edge. "Eliza." Mrs. Vale stood frozen behind him, staring into the darkness like she already knew the answer had changed forever. And deep below the ranch, something that had been sleeping for a long time finally stopped waiting. Silas was still kneeling at the edge of the well when morning began to break. He hadn't moved for a long time. Neither had Mrs. Vale. The ranch behind them looked unchanged, but it didn't feel unchanged anymore. It felt like something had been removed from it. Or something had been added. Silas finally spoke, voice rough. "Eliza." No answer came from the well. He tried again, louder. Eliza. Still nothing. Mrs. Vale stood a few steps back, staring at the ground like she couldn't look into the well anymore. Silas stood suddenly, anger breaking through his shock. We go down there. Mrs. Vale shook her head immediately. No. Silas turned on her. She's alive. Mrs. Vale's voice cracked. Or she's not the same anymore. Silas snapped, What does that mean? Mrs. Vale didn't answer. That silence was becoming her language. Silas looked back into the well again, breathing hard. Then. A sound. Not from below. From the ranch house. A door closing. Silas turned sharply. Did you hear that? Mrs. Vale froze. It came again. Inside the house. A slow, heavy creak of wood. Like someone walking. Silas grabbed her arm. Who's in there? Mrs. Vale whispered, No one should be. They both started walking fast toward the house. The door was slightly open. Silas pushed it wider. Inside, the hallway was empty. But not still. Something felt recently disturbed. A faint dust trail moved across the floorboards, leading toward the stairs. Silas followed it first. Mrs. Vale behind him, slower now, like she already knew where it was going. Halfway up the stairs, Silas stopped. A single word was written in dust on the railing. Eliza. Silas whispered, No. Mrs. Vale closed her eyes. They climbed faster now. The upstairs hallway was colder than before. The white door at the end stood open again. Silas stopped at the top. It's back, he muttered. Mrs. Vale shook her head. It never left. They moved toward it slowly. The room inside was not how they left it. The bed was untouched. But the air was wrong again. Like it had been filled and emptied too quickly. Silas stepped inside first. Eliza, he called. No response. Mrs. Vale entered behind him. Her face changed immediately. Because the closet door was open now. And inside. Something had been dragged out. Silas saw it too. A small chair. Turned toward the bed. As if someone had been sitting there. Watching. Silas whispered, This wasn't like this.